Hello and welcome back. Series 3 is in effect. This series, this episode, this week, this month, whatever we want to call it, let's go with this series. We've got an amazing lineup, and we decided to do a little bit different. So we do have a theme, but really the theme is that we don't have a theme. So it's guest's choice, AECO Mavericks Unscripted, and I couldn't think of a better way to start off with our unscripted AECO Mavericks than to have Clifton Harness join us today. So, Clifton, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm one of the original unscripted Mavericks, I suppose. No, I'm kind of a innovator disruptor for AEC out of Texas, co-founder, CEO at TestFit. We build configurators at scale and we do it really fast, which means we're a generative design company now. Let's see. We optimize buildings, parking lots, minimize the number of parking stalls, maximize your parking ratio. Really just trying to help people solve like annoying, consistent problems that show up in feasibility. And we've had a lot of success doing it over the last 7 years. So thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Glad to have you here. And you may have caught if you have those astute ears, that I said we. That's right. For Series 3, back in the hot seat or the co-host seat, we have John Pearson, who's come back to keep me on the level and, as I like to say, ask the hard questions. So welcome back for the co-hosting duty, John. We're always happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here and glad to nerd out about things and like you said, ask the hard questions, especially about generative design. No, I'm just kidding.
The first question is, you mentioned there, Clifton, that you do configurators and you build them quickly. Do you mean you build the configurator quickly, or once the configurer, speak a better English, is
Configurator.
there, once the configurator is built, what happens inside your 10,000 iterations happens quickly? I think I know the answer, but I'm going to let you tell us for sure.
Yeah, so lots of different brands of AI out there. Like TestFit's really good at computational AI, being human written code, human informed code, math done very quickly, low level languages. And essentially, like you simulate like intelligence because you can test things faster than a human ever could, and you can fail faster than a human ever could, and you can hit goals faster than on a specific range faster than a human could. But curators are individual components of logic that a designer has sat down and said, here's how a multifamily building works. And it's got 15 different constraints that are really meaningful. And we work, with architects and with industry to kind of come to a conclusion about like what are the most important parameters for, say, a double loaded corridor building for everybody to agree on. Okay, we build that configurator, we put it into the generative design tool. Now the 40% of buildings that are double loaded corridor buildings in the United States have, right out of the box, a place to have generative design done to them, so that's sort of a configurator, is just embedding your intelligence and doing it in a way that you can, understand the code you wrote, and and more importantly, you can manipulate that code and you can improve it very quickly because you know exactly how it works. That's a long-winded way to explain configurators, I guess.
Very cool. Every GIF I see from you guys, you're that's all real time. So I did a presentation a few years ago about kind of some of the machine learning things happening in our industry, and I called it Rise of the Machines. That was the presentation. And I showed TestFit on it with video clips that I got from you guys. And I had several questions during and after the presentation of whether or not that was real time or if there was some movie magic in there. And every time I tell someone, no, that's them dragging it live on the screen, people are always very doubtful about it. But it's just one of those cool things that when you see it happening, that long-winded explanation, like you just said, is all happening on the fly really quick, which I think is quite remarkable. It's just very gratifying to see that happen live.
So here
It looks like you got there now.
I have a piece of land and I can just start to generate. I'm telling it, generate every possible thing that you can between 0 and
Oh
2
wow,
FAR, and it's making a bunch of stuff, right?
just cranking.
So it's all happening in real time. Like it's not
Yeah.
in each one of these little bars over here on the left is one's scheme, you know. So there's probably 5,000 schemes maybe by now to review. And that's like my point is like that's more schemes than you need, you know? Like now we
Yeah.
can start to and it took no time at all. So gonna stop sharing
That's
so that I
awesome.
don't want to jump into a demo, too quickly.
Well, I know years ago I asked you about it and you said it could run on a potato as well. So I always liked that kind of that selling point from Testfit
Yeah.
back in the day too.
Yeah, the dream, or at least my co-founder's dream, is like that he could run everything from his $400 Linux laptop. And if you're constrained by that, and you can still generate 1 million square feet, IBC compliant floor plate, okay, yeah, you can run on Potato. And then, when you're doing the generative design stuff, it's well, what if we do let it run on more than one core?
Yeah,
See,
absolutely.
so, you're saying we can get more speed out of this, and it almost becomes too much speed, and you're like, all right, let's get back to improving the quality of the mask placement algorithms, so people trust that part of the system more.
Well, then the term generative design too, just because I've seen that thrown around for a long time, and a lot of us know it from a lot of people that listen to this podcast are Revit users, so a lot of us know it from a Revit point of view. With that term, are you met with criticism these days, or is it more optimism after all these years?
Honestly, people don't care about generative design anymore. It's like, why did you hashtag your post AI? This clearly wasn't made by an LLM. If TestFit's output looked worse, they'd be like, oh, an LLM would have, generated that.
There you go.
So I think the no one cares because they're more concerned with predictive transformers right now, which is like quite a bit more complex and hard and scary to understand, like how that works. Like a script, everybody knows what a deterministic, well, not everybody. Lots of people watching this show will know that a Dynamo script is like it's a deterministic script. I click the button, it runs and it finishes, and that's it. OpenAI is like doing that, but it's doing lots of
Yeah,
thinking, and it's bringing context of its own, and it's very different, as opposed to like understanding the code that you're writing and why. Yeah, I think I'm more concerned with, you know, like maybe we're in the last 10 years of competency. So let's make sure we get our wall assemblies really well documented right now, because future generations are not gonna know what an SDC rating is and why it's important, like they're just gonna show up and generate a building in some app that, you know, builds it 5 minutes later. Imagine the Futurama extremes that you could have in 50 years.
absolutely. I've read stories recently of people going for driving tests in cars that have self-driving, and they're being turned away, being told to come back with a dumber car for their driving test because cars are starting to get safe even these days to where younger people might not necessarily know all about blind spots and everything because cars are so smart now. So it's just that's an interesting point that there's potentially a future where our own kids are just laying out buildings and all the other stuff's just happening, which is
Should I
pretty
bring up
wild.
line weights? Let's just talk about line weights. Hey, AutoCAD like was in colors so that you could simulate where your line weights were going to be. And it
Yeah.
was so important because that's how you communicated on a piece of paper, like drafted it out thicker
Yeah.
and thinner. And, now it's
Even before
visible. It's
line
like
weight lead types.
lead types exactly, and now you have it's relegated to like a BIM manager visibility settings, and it's sort of like these are the things that make the drawings really like really meaningfully well documented and clear, and and the principals don't understand the software, so they can't implement the kind of clarity that they want to see. They can say it and they can get mad at the drawing, you can see it in pinups, but they get it right on one project and then new template or something, breaks again. And so like the viscom component, like a visual communication component, it's not going to go away. We just need to get better at it. And we're not going to if we, sort of forget, like we're forgetting about why we had line weights maybe. or at least the software because we tend to embed our software with our intelligence, we kind of forget why things were the way that they were.
Hmm.
And I mean, I see it now with, maintaining scripts that are 8 years old in a way. Like,
Yeah.
let's
You
remember
start to
why.
forget what that was
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Like, what does this thing do?
Yeah. I mean, when I was first in school, we were drafting door details and we had 4-inch returns behind the door jam. And I remember asking my instructor at the time, I was like, why is it 4? I just want to know. You know, it was when I was like early on learning AutoCAD even. And her reply was, it's industry standard. That's all she said to me. And then later on in a materials and methods class, I learned, stud, jip board, all of the components. It's 4 inches,
Yeah.
all of the stuff that
Two by
comprises
four
it.
plus a bunch of jip is about 4 inches. So you're not going to,
Exactly. So four
yeah.
inches will work for you. And finding that out, I was like, just telling me industry standard did me a disservice. I wanted to know why. And that's a example of that directly, as it was just, oh, just cause I said so. And that's definitely, I never thought about it that way when it comes to dynamographs, code, or any of this stuff. We're like programming into what we're doing, codifying
Well, if you build the
interesting.
software well enough, no one's going to remember that it was ever a problem. And I think I
Yeah.
look at plan, elevation, and section synchronization, maybe. Wow, that's handled already. Like everybody bitches about Revit, right? But guess what you're not doing? And guess what a whole generation of people are not doing, you know?
You're not casting lines up to draw your elevation from the floor.
Yeah.
Oh
Uh,
gosh.
But we forget, I feel like people that are in Revit forget just how much of a bitch that was or is if you have to do it. And so the grass is always greener, when you're
Yeah,
looking at software or you're looking at tool sets.
for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And to bring it back to what John said about, going in to get your driver's license and having a car that can drive itself or a car that's too smart, similar to, software that's doing generative design or bringing information in place. There's that time in place between when we did it by hand versus when we fully get to where it's fully automated. That time in between, whether it's 2 weeks or 20 years, that's the dangerous time, if you will, because the fully automated part's going to do it right, but then you have the human intervention, and somewhere in between, there's going to be an error or going to be something that's missed. And just like your example with the door jam, John, if you don't know why that is, and you think, well, I only have 3 inches. I'll just make it 3 inches, and then you get on site, and okay, it physically doesn't fit.
Yeah,
Then it comes down. But until you learn that lesson, you don't know. And if you put out 100 buildings between that first one and when you learn that lesson, there's 99 more lessons coming your way, and a door jam ain't one of them.
absolutely.
Buildings are incredibly complex. There's a reason why it takes many architects, like until their 50s or 60s, to have utter and complete command of the CD set, I would say. And by the time they're there, they're like tired
Yeah.
and they're like, I want to do the site planning.
Or they
I
get
don't
to that
know.
level and we throw them on CA and
Yeah,
they're just out
they're the
looking at
only
stuff,
ones that know,
yelling at people.
you're the only ones that know how buildings go together.
Man, some of the smartest architects I worked with were on CA and they were never in the office, and then like all of a sudden they're retiring and it was like, whoa.
You get really good at how. I mean, I talked on another podcast recently about this. Like when I realized that understanding how like those like how a door jam and how the return like how all that worked, but times every possible condition you could have in the building and sort of the amount of looming detail that you would need to care about to be a really good architect, I was like, oh God, I cannot do that. That's too much for me, And I was always gravitating towards other stuff anyways, but like the people that I sat like worked next to that would like whip out call it like the A8 or the details sections of the CD set just would, put some headphones in and figure out how to hide all of the construction, like all the stuff that would take to get built, and then you got shadow reveals, and you've got the perfect diffuser, all the materials worked out, how it's built, the sequencing to build it. It's a lot and not easy to obtain, I think, mastery over it, right? There's a lot in there.
No,
Definitely.
I agree. I went down that same road. You always get into the architecture or the design phase thinking, you're going to design those next great buildings. But, after going through school and everything I did was square, I knew that that wasn't the route for me. The technology and the innovation side was more appealing. But you also have to have sort of that, and I'm going to get my lefts and rights mixed up here, but that side of the brain that's the creative side that can see that. That's why you need sort of both people in that firm and both types working on your software for things like generative design when it comes back to that, because you need both sides of that. Because as you mentioned, Clifton, the beauty about what we saw in the little demo, and for those who's listening, check out the YouTube version because it's worth watching, is that we get very quickly in 30 seconds, 5,000 iterations. And as you said, we don't need 5,000 iterations, but you need to be able to hone that down and add some intelligence inside of that very quickly I got 5,000 generations and I see them all pop up, but I don't need 5,000. I need 10 really solid examples and reasons why one's better than the other. And is that's also something TestFit can help with as well, correct?
So I think the problem of getting the data is now gone. The more important problem for architects is how do you pick the design strategy for the story that you need to tell, to delight the client, and so like we're from the real estate development world, and it's, pretty easy to delight real estate client. You hit the program they need and you do it, under budget, like slight or at budget even these days, like you just weren't 10% over, and providing that value. Like it doesn't matter if it's generative design, if it's, configurators, or if it's, we have massing. Like TestFit has right now, I think we have a phenomenon happening with our freemium urban planner tool. It has 5,000 users now. 60 days ago, it had 3,000 users. So,
Oh, wow.
This is a freemium thing, and it's just massing, and
Yeah.
it has really good urban planning tools. Like it splits up sites and it tabulates stuff automatically, and it does easements, and it, presents stuff at scale. But, it's free, and it gives people the ability to start telling a story. And
Is
the
this what you
point,
posted about that at a college? They have it as part of one of their projects?
so we have another whole thing that's the academia stuff. The academia stuff, they're getting full copies of the
Very cool.
software to do generative design on, like Stanford. I wish the University of Texas, my alma mater, would call me and be like, hey, come talk, because we've got Stanford, USC, Purdue, University of Miami. God, I hope they're okay actually right now. All of these different real estate programs trying to get their like business majors to understand the spatial requirements. Like
Yeah.
you can't just have everything in the tiny site. So, but also like product market fit for buildings too. So design, because it exists, its access to it is being democratized, to academia, and then to the people that are really adopting, which is like our core customers. This is just beginning. We're like we've had 2 releases of generative design. The first one was super raw, and if you ran it in Zoom at the same time, it would kill Zoom. So,
Yeah.
like it used all of your computer's resources. And then we're like, do we need 200,000 solves? I think we could, step back a little bit. Yeah,
Awesome.
so like we're finding because we've stumbled across, I think, product market fit for generative design, you will see TestFit make the first sort of corrections around what that product needs to look like.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty critical early on, 2018, 2017, when they added generative design to Revit, because I had clients at the time that are like, we want to lay out buildings with it. Tell the generative design to do it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you need algorithms, and in the case of Revit, you need a dynamo graph that's the tooling to make it happen with your business logic. And they're like, no, I went to AU and I saw generative design just do it on its own. And I was like, no, there's stuff under the hood, man. Like, what in the world? And it was like client after client would come to me and just be like, have the generative design do it. And I'm just like, no. So like seeing there start to be that adaptability to where people can get instant feedback based off of all this logic you've built in is really cool, because I think we're reaching with some of this, we might reach that moment where it truly does feel like magic, and there is
Yeah,
no movie
yeah.
magic behind it.
I love the first, I think Autodesk generative design presentation for Revit, and I was there like with 700 other people in the webinar and watching the sort of thing, and it's really impressive. And they're, desks. I think this is back when desk placement was all the rage, and
Buzz.
you can see desks. Well, from my point of view, you can see desks moving around very slowly, in space, which is okay. You're selling this on top of Revit. It's for interior design. It's a different scale. But the most telling thing at the very end of the presentation was they went for questions, and one of the leaders at Autodesk was like, "All right, well, send us, problems that you all would like to have solved with generative design so that we can try to conceive of, some solutions." And I'm sitting there, guys, don't send them anything. Like, that's your IP. Like, that's your, like, you tell them you want, light switch placement automated. Like, those are scripts that like you built for your firm that might have, competitive advantage or something, like, because it
Yep.
was such a maker presentation to the makers and stuff. Like, it wasn't really a generative design ecosystem for like professional procedural generation companies like TestFit to come in and be successful. And at that time, they were investing in like SpaceMaker, and they just sort of forgot, I think, about, I don't know, what they were trying to achieve. I don't know. I still question, how valid, like, how many more configurators does TestFit need to build before any firm just feels like they're getting output that feels somewhat familiar to what they need? And that's something that 5 years ago I would have said, we will never have enough automation in the platform for, ABC architects to feel like the thing that gets generated is theirs. Now I'm a very different mindset.
Yeah.
There's 350 parameters. There, it's kit of parts approach. Firms can deploy their design logic at scale from the cloud. If they have their whole pipeline in the cloud, like the TestFit cloud, then anyone in their firm can call the data that any other deal was solved with to a new deal. So it's a self-reinforcing, kind of improving cloud and generative design solver. So like, that is to say, like, the customization to your firm happens when you just save your deals that you worked on in TestFit to your cloud. And then future generations pull from that information, if not the geometry directly, to inform what the next site plan is. So that there, I think the sort of uncanny valley, or I don't know what the architecture equivalent of the site plan looks man-made versus the site plan was made by a machine. Like, I feel like we're approaching whatever architect's version of a singularity is. It's doing topo automatically. It's starting to look like stuff that you couldn't do by yourself. And it's not even, LLM AI. We just said
Yeah.
we're going to put every script we've ever built into the same algorithm. Yeah.
Yeah.
A
That was awesome.
couple, just gonna say a couple quick questions for you there, Clifton. The first one, when you say your next generations or generations pull from it, you mean the next AI generation, not as in Gen Z or Alpha or X or Y. We're not waiting years to use this content again. It's the fact that we had a job last week and we created a new job. Those are the generations we're pulling from.
Yes. Yeah. So the TestFit sales team and marketing team and everybody were on the same cloud instance. And all of our customers have their own cloud instance. And any information saved to that is then reused for generative design in the next thing that you're solving. So the law of big numbers says that if you have enough information in your cloud, and we can solve 50,000 site plans in 3 minutes with that information, you're likely to have something that is good enough to, to look at. And then more importantly, something that's good enough to start optimizing. And that's another thing we haven't got into, is like, how do you optimize a building? I probably need another hour to discuss that one. Very hard topic.
Well, I think touching a little bit on that sort of leads into the second question that I had. And you were saying the idea that we can have, or we, the client, those using TestFit, can do enough iterations, enough generations, and store them in the same instance of their own sort of cloud environment. It's now going to start generating things that are in their style, if you will.
Yes.
And the idea here is that while it's generating something in that architect's style, the benefit is that they have a set of criteria for these type of buildings. They can generate you options for that very specific site. So again, it's not a car dealership or a building cars. Each site is a little bit different. That's always been the problem with architecture. But we can generate something very quickly in your style. And the end game or the benefit for the architect is they now have an asset they can bring into Revit, and now they can spend more time doing the design. You give them the skeleton, now they make that design look really good, which is what most people get into architecture for. So that's the service you're providing to them, is you're giving them time.
Yeah, well, I think it's yes, but another more harrowing thing to think about is when infinite work is free. Like we had TestFit, we sold one license to a big enterprise company, and they're putting 200,000 units a year through that one seat. So we're like, holy crap, TestFit's too good at what it does. We're going to need to renegotiate your use here because what happened? So I think be concerned about like moments like that where because work technically is unlimited and free. I mean, it's so cheap. ChatGPT or whatever, $20 a month, and it's got 120 IQ, like pretty smart executive assistant can do work for you. So yeah, we save time, but I think about where you want to spend your time. And I think when we're building, architecture software for architects, where do we want to spend time? And like, where do the architects want to spend time? And in my mind, it's like massing and it's rooms and proportion and maybe materials, but it's not placing door tags. It's not solving a unit mix. It's not minimizing, parking load before you really even care about the building itself. So I think my approach, or whenever I get to lead product at TestFit, which is right now I'm in the lead on product, which is great, but we're going to focus on keeping the human at the center. In the Matrix where they climb into the little mech and they go kill the machines, like that's sort of what's in my mind is if it's procedural versus large language model, okay, like we're going to team up with the architects and we're going to be just like a mech suit that we understand how to improve, and we'll give them the weapons.
I've always liked I always, because a lot of people like say automated, we're going to automate it, you're not going to need to worry about it, eventually you won't even have to be involved. But I always like a way that Andrew Human said it years ago at a presentation: augmented rather than automated. So it's right there with you, just working alongside you, which is great. So like you just said, like having that mech suit on,
Yeah. Like I think that God, I'm gonna get crucified. Like I keep saying this on these podcasts, but I don't want a collaborative tool. Don't give me a thing where I'm in the same environment with 10 other architects so that we can all go design the same building together. Like I'm an architect. I want all the tools to design every facet of that building, every scale piece of it by myself in a reasonable time, and give me the tools to collaborate with the engineers, with the people that are not my skill set. Because if work is unlimited and free, that means that the future of firms are like 1 to 2 people working together on just whatever the hell they want to. There's no point in having, business with massive overhead. So like everybody's building towards this BIM in the cloud thing for work that we're not going to be doing that way, really, maybe. So I'm just going to keep building
drawing walls.
I'm just going to keep building an augmentative mech suit, man. Yeah. And Andrew Human's he's like a great communicator. He said it right,
So with that, we're right on that half-hour mark. We're coming to the end. Before we wrap up, I always have one question I like to ask all the guests, and that's what's your hack for the episode, Clifton? What's your sort of your tip or trick about what we've been talking about here today for for all of our 3 listeners that are still with us.
What's
300, 3,000, whatever it might be.
what's my hack?
Yes. Clever play on our name, no doubt.
I mean, y'all got to go check out onlyplans.io. I'm trying to prove to AEC that you can literally build automation with the chatbot, and it's not
Yeah.
that. I'm not even technically minded, like I'm not. The most I ever did was like a Lisp routine that drew a box, and my focus here is, testbit doesn't do generative design inside a building at all. It just generates the building. But okay, well, let's step down one level in scale. Let's try to do like what Revit generative design did with tables inside of a room. What's the most important kind of objects inside of a building? What is the parking space of the building? This is how my head works, right? So I'm like, it's cabinets. Like cabinets are super annoying and they're everywhere and like they're modular. Let's just do cabinets. And you walk through, okay, a kitchen has these constraints, and you tell ChatGPT, I have these constraints. Remember, and you have to tell it, remember these constraints because it forgets.
Yeah.
It's very stupid. Yeah. So, anyways, it took me 30 posts to kind of get it to a place where like it could make some vaporware that got about 200 likes on LinkedIn, which for me is, yeah, there might be product market fit for a cabinetry kitchen generator thing, and then I call Aaron Mahler. I'm like, hey man, have you ever thought about doing a cabinet or a kitchen generator? Yeah, my hack is just go build stuff. Go hack stuff together and see if it works. And if it seems reasonable, go build it. And if not, like I literally test fit problems all day. Is this a reasonable thing to solve? Yes or no? No.
Mhm.
Okay, move on. So that's my hack. Is that good enough hack? Do I
That's
rank
I think
in
that's
the
cool.
top hacks?
That's definitely
And then I
that's in our
like that
top 3
you
seasons for sure.
documented it. Yeah, I think that's another part of the hack is share it, like document what's going on, what you're doing, the iterations. I've enjoyed reading through the blog, just seeing how it's came together because, yeah, I was on an email string with you a while back and you're like, let's lay out cabinets. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Well, I
I
mean,
was
it's
like,
like of course I can't communicate what I'm really trying to get across because I'm a designer, John, and I'm trying to design something. And I've been talking about cabinets internally for, I don't know, a year. So I was just like, I lost it. I'm like, I'm just gonna hack this thing,
send it. Very
Well,
cool.
and that's the way to do it. And as John mentioned, one of the things you hear today in the software and industry in general is, fail fast. So you try something, if it doesn't work, move on. But as John mentioned, the fact that you documented this and shared it, it's great to try something and fail fast, but we don't need 1,000 people trying and failing fast at the same thing.
Yeah, or maybe we do. There's what, 5 companies trying to build feasibility software for architects right now. Like I used to be annoyed by it, but now I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna rip off all of the best ideas from all of these companies, and that's capitalism. That's how competition improves the end product. So what if when Revit Technologies was starting in the early 2000s or earlier, I don't even know that story fully, but what if there was 5 guys that were all competing and maybe there was a more robust VC system so you could have more competition? You end up with better product instead of
Yeah.
a thing that we all rely on equally and have kind of moved our culture around. Like I'm going to AU next week because it's unavoidable. I love you guys, I do, but can we go? Can I see all of y'all at a different conference?
That's a
Yeah.
whole other podcast. And as we're bringing this into an end, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyways because I know it's going to start another stream. But the idea that you're right, if we have those 5 people creating those 5 like Revit softwares, we might have something better. But we also could have something crappier. Remember the VHS and the Betamax. There's always the example that whatever one gets the best VC behind it becomes the tool of choice, even though it's not the best choice. So it's not we don't always get the upside or the glass half full of a scenario. Sometimes we get the glass half empty.
Yeah, so I think maybe the encouragement that I can provide is that TestFit has so successfully monetized within real estate that we will continue to export for free, stuff that other guys are selling to architects. because we think we can do a better product, for architecture in the long run. So for me, the goal was, how do you monetize a revenue stream for AEC that is not dependent upon AEC?
And that is a great question. And I think the idea of being able to do that without having to monetize it, you're so good that you can have this export for free, is a perfect place to end as we're being here. So once again, thanks everyone for joining us on Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks, the technology podcast for the curious and creative in the ACO and beyond. As we're signing off here, and if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you join us again for the exploration of tools, technologies, and those time-saving hacks, as we just heard from Clifton, as well as shaping the future. If you enjoyed this episode, somewhere down here, there's always that nice little link. Be sure to subscribe and keep informed, and be sure to stay tuned for future episodes for the exciting world of AECO and technology and beyond. And until next time, keep building, innovating, and exploring the possibilities.
Hey!